If we see today's newspaper, there are some interesting articles, majority are not so, and the most important thing being how to use them in UPSC perspective. So I don't want to waste your time too much, at the same time not cover important things. We'll start with this particular article, a fund without a care for the RTI. We have briefly discussed this, and this is a controversial topic. Controversial in the sense there are different stakeholders. One is the government perspective, the other one is polity or constitution perspective. Yes, what is mentioned in the article is easy to see, what is not mentioned is also equally important. So let's say from polity point of view or constitution point of view, every rupee that is taken by democracy through legal channels should be accountable, transparent, and if you see your syllabus copy in ethics, there is a line called as utilization of public funds. In ethics syllabus, there is a word called as utilization of public funds. In 2020, the first case study you see is about utilization of public funds. So we expect our bureaucrats, IAS officers, or anybody to use public funds in the most efficient fashion and most effective fashion. But when it comes to the highest authority in the land, that is the prime minister, polity wise, politics wise, right? He or anything that is linked to him should be beyond and above suspicion, right? So in this article, Mr. Sridhar is trying to say that government is not being very transparent, clear. There are a lot of legal loopholes. And at the same time, no way he adds this line saying there is no proof of any corruption. Nobody is blaming prime minister of corruption, right? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, audible.
Yeah, fine. I just got it out, like whether I was in a mute or something. Okay, so the most important thing being, we are not accusing anybody of corruption. Okay, at the same time, the government does not have any basis to hide this data. There is no need. If you haven't done any corruption, what are you so afraid of, right? But public perception management is very important for the present government. So that is why this entire debate is happening, or else UPSC aspirants would have saved 15 minutes. The acronym created that only Prime Minister cares, or Prime Minister of India cares. So his image is being pushed to care, and his that it's like a PR management. We are using the term PM cares. There are alternative funds, disaster management fund, Prime Minister National Relief Fund. These are also funds. But when we are talking about Prime Minister cares, it shows a whole different perspective. So that is why government is very hell bent on using this particular name. But the problem is, are you misusing it? Nobody can prove that, right? And at the same time, there is no malintention in the entire program. But as I have said multiple times, whatever the outcomes are there, let's say Prime Minister Care Fund has been used to buy 10 oxygen cylinders or oxygen concentrators. Then people will come and say the money used for oxygen concentrator, let's say Prime Minister sent 10,000 rupees to Gujarat to buy 10 oxygen concentrators. Tomorrow someone will come and say actually the cost was 9,850 only, or 9,600 only. That is corruption, unnecessary drama, right? Or out of this 10 concentrators, only 8 are working, 2 are defunct. Prime Minister is not using the funds effectively and efficiently. So to avoid this kind of nuts and bolts, I believe that Prime Minister is not so willing to disclose the funds, and no other reason. Okay, is it responsibility of Prime Minister to check each and everything that he is creating or purchasing under PM cares? Normally no, but in this case you are avoiding the machinery called as government. PM cares and government are two different entities according to the government. So when you don't have any attachment, you automatically become accountable. If you don't want to be accountable at a personal level, just throw it on the government. It's like any other thing. Prime Minister created a fund. He is giving power to the state, and state should take care of all the machinery. If the machinery is not working, some officer is responsible for that. Right? It's a very simple story. Okay. So that's one way to look at this entire article. So is it wrong that if two concentrators are not working? Yes, because these kinds of funds are created for special situations, not for ordinary day-to-day activities. I'm not using it to put red lights, green lights, traffic signals. I'm using it to save lives. PM fund, disaster management fund, PM cares, all these things are used under extraordinary circumstances, and every rupee used under extraordinary circumstances is supposed to save lives. And there comes the accountability and transparency. The further we hide, the more complicated this gets into the picture. Okay, so it's a simple story. He dragged it in so many technical ways. And please be very clear, his anger or his frustration is totally valid. In a democracy, we are not talking about some corner MLA or a minister. We are talking about the prime minister of the nation. So every it is supposed to come under public authority. RTA Act should apply to it. And how can you bypass the law? When a law says to create a constitutional body or a statutory body, it is accountable. How are you creating an extra constitutional body, right? That too to save lives. Why not use these two things? Okay, right? Why not use the Prime Minister National Relief Fund or the Disaster Management Fund? So all this drama has created a problem that whenever we try to do something outside the scope of rules and regulation, even Prime Minister is not immune from criticism. You will understand this article better. Just a second, I will show you something else. This is today's news. Okay. Pradhana Mantri Poshan Shakti Nirman. Okay, this is a new scheme that the government has announced yesterday, right? What is this scheme? This is nothing but National Scheme for Midday Meals in School. It has been renamed into PM Poshan Shakti Nirman, PM Poshan. The popularity of the scheme is PM Poshan. Midday meal scheme is renamed into PM Poshan. Did the system get smarter or dumber? It got smarter, right? Why? If I create a new scheme called as PM Poshan and not use midday meal scheme, all the same drama that we have seen in the earlier article of not being accountable, transparent, so on and so forth will come into the picture. So best of the both worlds. I will use an existing scheme and I will just rename it to PM Poshan. Contrast this with this. Instead of creating a new fund, this old scheme, the Prime Minister National Relief Fund, could have been renamed as PM Cares. All problems solved. Why? This fund has a lot of access. For example, it is created under a trust under Income Tax Act. It is audited by Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Income tax exemption is given. So all the good things that fund needs are under this Prime Minister National Relief Fund. So just renaming would solve the problems. This is exactly what has been done in this case. National Midday Meal Scheme is replaced as PM Poshan. I hope you make the connection between that article and this article. Right? So at the end of the day, it's all about PM. But for democracy, PM is also a public servant. The most important thing that we need is accountability and transparency. So why are we not stressing too much on this article? What if tomorrow government comes and say, yes, everything, a act will be passed, all this discussion will be thrown into the dustbin, right? And basic questions like, is right to information a fundamental right?
No, sir.
What about the rest of you? Just think about it. So Bhavishri is saying right to information is a fundamental right. How?
Sir, according to me, it will come under Article 21.
Fantastic. So even according to Supreme Court of India, it comes under Article 21. Right to information is a fundamental right. Nobody can take away that fundamental right. What most aspirants confuse is right to information is a fundamental right. But to empower that right, a act has been created. So right to information is a fundamental right. To empower that act, or for me to exercise that right, a right to information act has been created. Act is a statutory body, but right is fundamental right. During election times, you must have seen MLAs or MPs filing all their assets, criminal cases, etc. This is direct outcome of Supreme Court expansion of the fundamental right. A voter has a right to know who he is electing, what are his assets, what is his crimes, or what are the crime cases pending against him, what is his education qualification, each and everything. Only then he will decide between X or Y. So Association of Democratic Reforms versus Union of India case, I think. So you get the idea, right? Right to information is a fundamental right, and it should not be treated lightly. If this goes to Supreme Court, I am 100% sure that Supreme Court will come in the favor of the person who is filing the case. That right to PM Care Fund should definitely come under Right to Information Act, no discussion. The only things that are exempted under Right to Information Act are national security, friendly relations, patents, and secret information that runs the company, like patents, copyright, and all those things. National security related, fundamental rights, foreign relations right related, these things cannot be asked under Right to Information Act, but everything else will fall under Right to Information. Are we clear? And there is also one more term you just need to keep an eye on in this article, that is Office of Profit and Corporate Social Responsibility. These two terms are very important for your GS paper 3 and GS paper 2 select respectively. Office of Profit. You must have heard about something called as Representation of People Act, right? So if a MLA or MP is holding Office of Profit, he is eligible to be disqualified as MLA or MP. Simply means a government body which is paying salary to MLA or MP is created and he is working in that body, then that is called as Office of Profit. Again, please be very clear. A MLA or MP will get salary, right? Government of India or government of the state is paying them salaries. Apart from that, if they are also a member of a government body which is paying salaries to them, then they are disqualified as MLAs and MPs, knowingly if they are continuing in that, right? So they should not work under any Office of Profit. So in PM Care's case, he is saying those 3 MPs and Prime Minister have created an extra constitutional body and getting some benefit out of it. So whenever they get some extra benefit out of it, apart from the salaries that they are getting, it is called as Office of Profit. I'm sure in paper 2 you will be covering this particular topic. The next one is Corporate Social Responsibility under Companies Act 2013. Corporate social responsibility, I hope all of you can easily understand this. If this is society, this is corporate. Only by feeding from the society, that means the corporate is feeding into the society and it is making a lot of money. So it is the responsibility of a corporate to give back something. It is only taking from the society. consumers are from society, resources are from society, everything is from society, right? So the more the corporate take from the society, the richer it will get, but it is not giving anything back to the society. So government brought a compulsory provision of sharing at least 2% of its profits back with the society. Yes, all those who have seen that Mahesh Babu Telugu movie Srimantudu will understand it better, right? You have to give back something to the society or else you will get fat. So in the same way, corporate social responsibility is a essence, a concept where corporates have to share their profits back to the society in the name of schools, toilets, hospitals, other activities, right? So if someone is donating that 2% of money or whatever profits they are making to PM Cares Fund, it is considered as corporate social responsibility. Clear? Okay. Just focus on the keywords. Those two are the important things. The digital health scheme we will cover in this particular PDF. Okay. Now, right. So as I have mentioned, Prime Minister has recently, yesterday, named the midday meal scheme as PM Poshan Shakti Nirman. Why Poshan means nutrition or nourishment? Yes. Why? What is the need for midday meal scheme in India? We will see. What is the issue? In Global Hunger Index, India is ranking 94 under serious category. So that is clearly showing that India is having a very weak infrastructure in relation to hunger security. Under sustainable developmental goals also, we have an obligation to feed every mouth in the country. Under National Food Security Act also, we have this promise. And most importantly, after the Green Revolution, we have extra buffer stocks. Just yesterday we have seen. Yes, extra buffer stocks we have, but still, yes, every public sector unit company should also take corporate social responsibility. All companies that are created under Companies Act 2013 come under corporate social responsibility. There is a criteria. You need to make 5 crore or more turnover, or 2 crores or more profits. So only such companies which are meeting that criteria should donate 2% of the profits. Yes. Now coming back to the discussion, why? One more reason. Global Hunger Index we have seen. According to National Family Health Survey also, we need to see underweight, stunted, wasted. What is difference between all these three things? Underweight is for your age, you are not having a proper weight, right? Stunted means for your age, you are not having a proper height. And wasted means the child is so damaged from lack of food, lack of nourishment, that his brain activity or development is hampered permanently. Wasted. You can recover from underweight. Stunting, it will take a lot of effort, but probably slim chances are there to recover. But once you are wasted, that means the child's cognitive development will never properly happen. So such kind of children in India under 5 are 35%, 38%, and 21%. Just imagine the numbers. Not far off records, very new, right? 2015 and 16. Just few years ago also, this is a percentage of population who is suffering from malnourishment. And lastly, the socio-economic cost. India is losing 4 to 8% of GDP in the name of productivity due to child malnourishment. The more the children are suffering, the more problematic it is for the economy. So I have shown you the reasons why we need to invest in midday meal scheme. One is global hunger, the other one is underweight children, and the last one is economic cost. Now, what is this scheme trying to do? Right. this scheme technically is bringing all the children who are studying in government schools or government aided institutions from class 1 to class 8 under midday meal scheme or PM portion scheme. Okay. The most important thing is everyone studying from class 1 to class 8 is getting covered under midday meal scheme. That's a huge amount of leap of faith. Okay. That's one good thing. Next one is it is also promoting school nutrition gardens. Very straightforward point, no need to explain. Children will have first-hand experience in the agriculture. They will create something. Again, this is just for hangama. In reality, it is very difficult for the country to maintain all such things. Here are some interesting points. The interesting point is farmers producer organization and women self-help groups. These will use locally grown data to help fight the malnourishment. I think this is a wonderful step, linking farmers producer organizations and women self-help groups. Why? There is a provision for you to hire cooks and provide quality midday meal schemes. So self-help groups, few women can come together and they can do that effectively, right? At the same time, farmer producer organizations can supply quality ingredients on a daily basis or a weekly basis to the schools, not for free, but for remunerative purposes only. But it will help farmers, it will help women, and it is also helping to fight the malnourishment. All three targets are being achieved in one go, right? Next, this scheme also targets aspirational districts and districts with high prevalence of anemia. Anemia means iron deficiency. Okay. All right. So don't you think all these are very progressive steps? Right. Here we can see that cycle of childbirth, right, or child malnourishment. If a woman is married at the age of 18, I told you she will give birth to low weight babies. Low weight birth babies will be malnourished and the cycle will continue. This is a very vicious cycle. So by targeting the anemia districts first, government is doing the right thing. The next one is, sorry, direct benefit transfer. Directly to schools. And here is one more interesting concept called as Tithi Bhojan. Tithi Bhojan is a program where government encourages children who are coming from well-off families to bring 2 boxes so that they can share with the not so well-off. So if you are from let's say a well-off family who can make nutritious food, you will bring 2 boxes to the school so that along with the midday meal scheme, you can share something you brought from the home to your friends who are not so well-off. At the same time, whenever there is a festival or a special occasion, communities will be encouraged to cook some nutritious meal, special meal, delicious meal, and it will also improve the quality of life for that particular children. So Tithi Bhojan is a unique concept. We have to see how well the society will accept this, and it is totally voluntary, especially the Tithi Bhojan concept. And why should we, or why is government investing such huge amount of money into midday meal scheme, that too from class 1 to class 8? This is the interesting point. We call it as return of income. Return of income. If you see this first line, 35% are underweight, 38% are stunted, and 21% are wasted. that wasted children will be a burden on the system because they will be poor, and the poor have to be taken care by the government itself. But now, if you see this fact, it will tell you that whenever government invests $1 on nutritional interventions, okay, it will generate anywhere between $34 to $38 in public economic returns. That means prevention is better than cure. If you can spend 75 rupees on a children at the very young age, okay, you don't have to bear hospital costs, you don't have to bear let's say unemployment costs, you don't have to bear food security costs, right? In the long run, all this money will be saved in the format of $39 if you invest $1 at the right time. So every dollar that government of India is going to invest in nutritional interventions will return multiple times to the government. And that is the amount, and that is the power of return of income. I hope you are able to understand the logic. A stitch in a time will save 9 or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Apart from this, what is government trying to do? Government is trying to create something called as, I mean, it is already there, social audit. It is being made mandatory in all districts. A simple explanation is needed here. What is social audit? Auditing, all of you know, audit means to check the quality of either food, money, resources. Why this is important, I will tell you. Few years ago in Bihar, okay, few years ago in Bihar, I think 20 children died in midday meal scheme because the oil can that they were using was a old fertilizer can. The cook did not even had the time to clean that fertilizer can, and he directly poured the sambar or something into the same vessel and distributed it to the children, and all the innocent children who ate that unfortunately died. That is a national shame. Yes. Why? The headmaster or someone must have done some corruption. The amount given to purchase the utensils must be eaten away by someone, or else why will you need a fertilizer can for sambar or something else? It's highly idiotic, right? So somebody somewhere ate the money of the children, and that is where social audit comes into the picture. Social audit means the group of people living in that particular area, let's say some parents, educated teachers, educated people of that particular area, they will come and they will inspect whether every rupee is being invested by the school in the right place, yes or no. Okay, so not government officers, not someone who can be purchased through money, right? If you are appointed as a social auditor, will you take bribe money in the case of children? I hardly doubt that, right? In the same way, if society is auditing everything, then there will be a less chance of corruption. Okay, apart from that, inspection by students of college and university on the ground execution will also be implemented. These two are major changes. Clear? That is social audit. Now, you can read this on your own. I don't want to discuss what is midday meal scheme here, but one point I want you to focus is on the last 2 points. Impact. The program covers all children, not only in government schools, but also in madrasas and religious institutions. So that's a prelims question there. Under Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, SSA is Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. So any government aided or government related institutions are covered under midday meal scheme. So that's a prelims point. Okay. Next. So what should be the way forward? PM CARES midday meal scheme is very good, fantastic. Apart from that, what else should be done? All the points. For example, Mission Poshan 2.0, promotion of Ayush schemes, Anganwadi services, ICDS scheme. These things should be implemented in a better way. But the crux is this points. What is new about this particular scheme and how is it going to solve the society's problems? And we are also adding transparency and accountability. Any questions on this particular topic?
There was an interview today by
in Hindu.
UN.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Regarding the same. So I was just linking that.
Okay. Yeah.
Stats are provided. So many stats.
Again, see, as I told you, once the data is collected, it's easy to fit in the right places. First, if you know the story, if you know the Ramayana, then putting the facts is very, very easy. And if you can natural link, that is fantastic. Next one is this we have already covered, but we will cover just briefly again. Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. This is nothing but the digital health ID that we have seen yesterday also. What is the context? Why we need to create a Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission? It is to develop the backbone of the country. Above all, there is a national health policy which creates a situation. What is that? National health policy envisages a situation where highest possible level of health and well-being is provided to all at all ages. So everybody in this country should get the highest possible level of health. With the lack of data portability, with the lack of access to resources, right now people are not getting the best. So policy is a vision, it's a direction. That is where Government of India is planning to head. And second thing is universal access to good quality healthcare services. Right now, we have insurance-based schemes, Ayushman Bharat, right? Or out-of-pocket expenditure, OOP. Either I should be covered under a government scheme to get the quality healthcare services, or I have to invest my own money, that is out-of-pocket expenditure. But financial hardship is a real problem. If people are spending money on COVID-related issues, they are going into poverty, and poverty is increasing in the nation. We have seen that. So to overcome all these things, government has brought in this National Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. Now, what is so special about this scheme? How are we going to remember it in a structured fashion? The first and most important thing is it will create a unique 14-digit digital health identification. Thank God we are not linking it to Aadhaar one more time. Yes or no? So we are creating a unique identification of its own. Point number one. Second thing, securely store and access their medical records, which is nothing but a data repository. We have discussed at this point. Ramu, like let's say any informal labor won't carry all the ticks. Every test, every diagnostic test, every medicine, every report that is generated on the patient will be recorded in this database. Everything from the moment he checked in to the moment he's checking out, everything is digitized end to end. Next is data portability, the same point. Longitudinal health records. That means in 2013, what happened to that particular patient, in 2019, what happened, in 2020-21, what is happening. So his entire health record is recorded in a hierarchical fashion, which is very important for some diseases. Let's say in 2013, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Till 2014 or 15, he continued the medication and he stopped. Again in 2019, that it has resurfaced. So what is the treatment given in 2013 and what is the treatment given in 2019, and whether he is continuing it till 2021 or not can be identified. So because multi-drug resistance is a very common problem in this country, multi-drug resistance is created only when people stop the medication. Normally also we can see the same habit, right? When we go to a doctor for fever or something, he will take this course for 1 year, sorry, 1 week. 3 or 4 days we take the medicines, and once we stop, we feel better, we stop the medicine, but we don't take it for all the 7 days. The problem is the same with TB. The TB medication is supposed to be for 2 years. It's a very long course. If the patient stop in the midway, the bacteria actually gets stronger. The bacteria will get very, very stronger, and it won't next time be effective, or worry about this treatment one. That is called as multi-drug resistance bacteria. That's a huge problem. So all such longitudinal health records will be identified, which is good. Next, it helps in data-driven policy making, not only for the individual, but for the system. How? Data-driven or evidence-driven. In a particular state, how many people are availing, let's say, dialysis, or how many people are availing TB medication, or how many people are availing something else. So like this, if a state identifies, okay, I have a huge demand for tuberculosis, but I don't have demand for, let's say, dialysis missions. So government will make sure that it's prioritizing the data accordingly. So that is data-driven policy making. Not only that, if you see here, if every test, every diagnostic test, medical report, everything is supposed to be registered in the government database, the hospitals cannot put fake bills or fake data. They cannot. Right now they can say, I have taken 4 or 5 x-rays and I'm charging him 20,000 rupees under insurance, and the government will pay. But in reality, if it is digitized, somebody will cross check, right? Why do you have to take 5 x-rays of the same patient when one exercise is sufficing, right? So then that will create a deterrence in the hospitals, not to waste the government's money. So in that way, government can save a lot of money. Next, it can also be helpful in teleconsultations and e-pharmacy. Let's say you stay in Assam. You stay in Assam in a remote village. You have internet connection, but you don't have mobility. So you can call some government helpline and you can say, I'm not feeling well. Then all you have to do is tell your unique health ID number. That particular doctor who is doing the telephone conversation will enter that number. He will get all your data, right? And he will exactly know what is your problem, or what you are talking about, or what happened to you. So this same longitudinal health record will be accessible both in teleconsultations and e-pharmacy, right? Next, not only this, there is a concept called as a sandbox. This is also again important for your prelims. The term sandbox. Sandbox is not related to Ayushman Bharat or health. Sandbox is a concept. It's like beta testing. It's a box where private players will do all the testing before releasing it to real time or real life market. So Ayushman Bharat data will be given to insurance, hospitals, doctors, and all these things. Those people will test it in the sandbox as if it's a real test. Okay, and they will identify some bugs, problems, security issues, and other things. They will identify and make it better. And after that, they will release it into the real market, because privacy is a huge issue. We cannot directly release it into the market and say, everything is fine. So hospitals, insurance, all these people will have access to sandbox under National Health Authority. Okay. Clear? No confusions, right? Self-explanatory, but I hope you will remember the keywords. So instead of depending on your family and friends, you can directly find good doctors and specialists near to you using the digital health identification system. issues are self-explanatory. Lack of personal data protection bill is there, but government is saying we are creating the app with privacy by design. That's a technical term you need to learn. Privacy by design. That means whenever we are creating an app, privacy is the default setting. Everywhere you go in that app, no details are released to any third party, and everything is designed with privacy in mind. So that is a very sophisticated, not sophisticated, that is very future oriented app creation. So government is saying this platform will be created on the similar lines. Next, as this article mentions, data is very important, but data entry will increase, so the burden on the hospitals and the system will also increase, and there is a high chance of erroneous data. Let's say a wrong thing has been added to the database, that creates a huge problem, right? Next, infrastructure. To use health IDs even in the rural areas, we need to have good internet speeds and connectivity, or else the entire program will fall flat. Most important thing, as Hindu criticizes, is lack of adequate number of doctors and beds. Okay, you have technology, you have fantastically everything, but what about nurses, beds, oxygen cylinders, and doctors? Without them, what is the point of creating all these apps? So invest in doctors and infrastructure. That is what Hindu is trying to criticize. Next. So there is an asymmetry between the service providers, that is hospitals, insurance companies, right, and the patients. These people have more knowledge, these people have less knowledge. So there is a gap between these two people, and this gap can be exploited by the insurance providers to charge you higher premiums. By knowing your health data, all your health data, they can tailor suitably created more insurance premiums to you, and that is something called as data mining, which is not good for the common individual. Let's say a informal labor is there. Okay, he has tuberculosis. The insurance company have all the right in the world to know that before insuring him only he had TB. Okay, today I recorded, I created insurance. Tomorrow I told them I have TB. That is unethical and that is wrong. Okay, so in that way, the company has the right to know whether that person I'm going to insure is having any pre-diseases or not. That's not the issue. What is the issue? Let's say informal labor is there in a line of heavy injury. He gets frequently injured. Okay, by looking at his digital data, the insurance company understood that, you know, we need to pay extra to this person, right? At the time of insurance, he is not injured, he is perfectly all right, everything. But because of his access to his previous data, the insurance company is asking 20% more from him as a premium. The data is working against the X. That data is supposed to help X, but the data is actually working against him. So such kind of things should be avoided. Again, this is a very small example, not a perfect example, but that will give you a perspective how the data can be used by the insurance companies against the individuals. Pre-existing diseases, company should know. Probable insurance clauses, the company should not tax more. Clear? Okay. This article, right? So what is your core I mean, understanding of this article? I mean, what exactly is missing from your understanding? If you can tell me that, I will give you more clarity on the same. Yes, Bhushri? Anyone?
Sir, he's saying the way forward, like, okay, he's giving the problems. Crime rate is high. Institutions, the justice delivery should improve. There is a correlation between the article which is beside this wheels of justice. There are a lot of cases pending, and there are a lot of people in under trails that are going. And there are a lot of people sitting in jails just because of under trails. He's one solution is that, and I mean, he's saying the way forward, but is it feasible? Like decreasing the crime rate index. I mean, just sitting in AC rooms like this, we can say, I mean, just looking at the stats, if we decrease the crime rate, happiness will increase. This is normal, any basic analysis anybody can say, but how will that translate onto ground? So that's what I was thinking, sir.
Okay. Anyone else?
Also, he's quoting that Bhutan and Saudi Arabia has this. Saudi Arabia has Ministry of Happiness, and Bhutan uses GNH instead of GDP. I mean, in the amidst of so many burning issues, like can we afford to go like this, like these kind of suggestions?
Okay. So in 2014, I think there was a question, what is, I think it's an essay topic or economy paper, I forgot, but there was a topic, GDP versus gross national happiness. Okay, first of all, we need to simply understand few things. I hope I got the spelling correct, right? So happiness is a subjective term. It's hard to measure. All of us agree this much. So what is he trying to say? Rule of law, pendency, public service, delivery. When any of these things are not functioning properly, it only adds to the decrease of happiness in the society. For example, let's say farmers bill, right? I personally believe farmer bills are very progressive in nature. Okay, but the implementation of farmers bill need to be perfect. This is a huge term. For example, if a contract between a farmer and a company, okay, need to be perfect, and it should be in favor of the farmer. I'm not talking as a leftist or anything, but farmer is having less amount of knowledge, companies have a lot of knowledge. So the bill or contract should be in favor of the farmer mostly, without causing too much loss to the company, right? So if this is not there in the ground level, that the farmer will face a lot of problem. It might take 5 or 10 years for the judiciary to come in and rectify the situation. But for that 5 or 10 years, every day when he is sleeping, he will have this agony. He will have some kind of pain, right? And that is taking away his happiness. Rule of law is there. You purchased a land. In a middle class family, you purchased a land. Okay. Somebody came and occupied that land. Okay. You're not dying. Your happiness is not being taken away. But every time you think about all the hard-earned money invested in someplace else, taken away by someone else, it will create a sense of unhappiness. The same is with pendency in the court. If Rakesh Sharma versus Vinita Sharma. Rakesh Sharma versus Vinita Sharma case. Okay, this is about daughter's right is as much as son's right for father's property. 50-50. 50%, 50%. This is the case. I told you, right? In 2008, I think Supreme Court gave a judgment. If the case is before 2008, it is one thing. After 2008, it is one thing. So it took 12 years for the Supreme Court to simply say it doesn't matter which year, anything, any time, father's asset will go to the daughter and son equally. But for these 12 years, a lot of families in India had gone through this small concept called as lack of happiness. Okay, so these are all symptoms. These are all just tip of the icebergs, right? Your happiness is actually totally in your hand, but system is adding that rub or friction, which will make you actually feel, the problem. Let's say you are frustrated. You are very frustrated while going from office to your home. Okay, the roads are bumpy. The road has nothing to do with your happiness. Your frustration from office is carrying over to your home, but the government is adding the friction. If the road is smooth, you will blame the auto driver or taxi driver or the cab wala running very speedily. You will blame someone. You have to transfer your frustration. Here the state is that particular entity. So judiciary spending is creating problems, rule of law are creating problems, and public service delivery are definitely adding a lot of problems to the society. If these things function very smoothly, they will add more happiness to the society, or at least they will nullify your frustrations. They won't accelerate your unhappinesses. Okay, and intergenerational inequalities. For example, public service delivery. Yesterday we have discussed about NEET exam. If Tamil Nadu schools, they are teaching in Tamil, okay, no problem. But are you teaching in world class level? I'm not blaming the teachers here. I'm just saying, is the system creating world class students using Tamil as a language? Germans are doing that. Chinese are doing that. So why can't someone learning in Tamil can do that? Because there is a public service delivery failure. We take it as a granted. Okay, Tamil Nadu schools or government schools are just for show. Nobody joins them. Even if you are joining, we are not providing you good quality. This failure of Tamil Nadu schools versus CBSE English medium schools has created intergenerational inequalities, and that is adding to more unhappiness, right? So everything that the system do will have implications on lakhs and lakhs of people. So what is a normal thing for you and me is a life-changing thing for tons and tons of people. And who is responsible? The system. That is what he is trying to bring in this entire discussion, that you may not feel it like it's a huge deal, but every small thing that the system will do will actually have an impact on lakhs of families, and collectively all those families are suffering. Again, I'm not blaming the system alone. There are a lot of structural flaws. Let's imagine a rural woman. She has to go 2 kilometers every day to fetch water. Yes. And she has to bring it to her home. So this entire journey will take 2 hours of her life every day. Is she happy? Like this, 100 women or 1,000 women in that village are going every day to collect the water, and 1,000 people are investing 2 hours. So 1,000 into 2, 2,000 man hours are wasted. Okay, 2,000 man hours are wasted, and that is an unhappy situation. If these 2 hours are not needed, that means if government is providing water connection all the way till your homes, you are saving 2000 man hours per day in a village, and you can use it on, let's say, some productive outcome like self-help groups or learning something new, which will actually increase their income and increase their happiness. A street is there, right? The street lights are working. What does it change? It does not change anything for you and me. Probably driving in a bike or a car, we doesn't care whether the lights are working or not. But imagine a family living here. Okay, so if here is a factory, right? The husband do not want to send the woman in to the factory through that particular road, so he stopped her from going, because when she returns in the evening at 7 p.m, this is a very dangerous area. It is adding unhappiness to her family. Is system wantedly doing it? Did the system target her? No. At 7 p.m. it's dark and the road is unsafe. The husband do not want her to go. As simple as that. If the street lights are working, if the traffic constables are, sorry, if there is patrol system, the unhappiness in one family is removed. Add it to 1,000 women or 10,000 families in this country. If you actually look hardly, I'm 100% sure 10,000 families in the system or in this country are not sending their women to work because of such reasons. That is unhappiness. So we may not change the system as a whole, but every time we make the system better in small, tiny ways, like adding traffic lights, signals, making sure the red light and green light are working, somebody is there in the junction to control the traffic, things will get better, smoother, and that will remove the frictions, right? So now you read that particular article, I think it will make more sense. Are you able to see that article in a perspective now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And remember, all the ministries in the world, even if Harry Potter is appointed as Ministry of Happiness, okay, you cannot make people happy. I will always find new reasons to cry. That is human nature. What we should target is whether are we trying to make the lives of the people better? Are they trying to find happiness on their own? Yes, happiness is a very subjective term. Compared to Bhutan population, what is Bhutan population? I keep telling this joke, right? On a busy day, in let's say Gokul chart, you can find the entire population of Bhutan. Or on a Ramzan time, you can find the entire population of Bhutan in the Charminar area. So we cannot compare Bhutan with 1.4 billion population. It's a huge number. We cannot serve each and every person. For example, someone living in Northeast, they have a problem. Someone living in Godavari districts, they have a different problem. By setting up a ministry, it is not going to change anything. But are we even interested in making the life of every person 1% better? That will make collectively happiness a better thing, right? So happiness in the simplest terms is to keep or to improve the standards to the maximum extent. What is the role of that Ministry of Happiness in the appointed in the UAE? We have, I think in Madhya Pradesh, we have a Department of Happiness. Why go to UAE? In India, in Madhya Pradesh or Maharashtra, I don't remember, we have a Department of Happiness. Their job is to promote happiness. So how can people be more happier, healthier, mental health? Yes. So all these things are to be considered by the Department of Happiness to promote happiness, to remove the frictions. Okay. UAE, I have no idea. I will be lying if I say I know what Ministry of Happiness is doing in UAE. But I think in COVID pandemic, Japan and UK, both of them also created a Department of Loneliness or Minister of Loneliness. So in this way, happiness or loneliness have different responsibilities to promote how to take care of the people, right? I hope this article makes sense. Any questions, any confusions now? Happiness is a difficult term. And lastly, before ending the class, I want to ask you a simple question. Think about it. In 1940s, we had this Bengal famine, right? Lakhs and lakhs of Indians have died because of the negligence of the Britishers, okay, because of lack of food. From 1970s onwards, technically we have Green Revolution. In 2021, we have the highest buffers. We are keeping maximum number of people alive through food security. We are keeping 1.4 billion population alive through food security. How many of them are happy? Alive versus happy. Are you just keeping them alive or are you making them happy? So what should be there? I think John Rawls will help you here. So what are the most common things that a citizen needs or the state can provide reasonably to keep them happy? You got it right? So happiness is nothing but improving the standard and quality of life. If we work in this particular direction 24/7, 365 days, the state is doing better things. National Digital Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission will also add to this happiness. Why? The poor people won't be pressurized to carry thousands of reports, documents, get so many things and all those things. So their life will become a bit easier. That will add to their happiness. Don't you think so? Okay. Yes. Any questions? Right. See, this bureaucracy article is not that important. When we meet in person, I will definitely discuss it within 5 minutes. Don't worry. And today's newspaper also, I think they are the important articles. If there is anything else, I will share the PDF so that you can read the PDF once and it will save you a lot of time.
Sir,
Yes.
Sir, you just mentioned that there was a Department of Happiness created in Madhya Pradesh or Maharashtra.
Mhm.
Is there any significance change in happiness of people so that it can be bought in other states also?
I am not aware of the empirical surveys because I honestly I'm not sure whether the government followed it up with the empirical data. I have created a department. What is the outcome of the department? That's a very really interesting question. I will find out and get back to you, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So any other questions?
Any value addition on today's Indian Express?
Today's Indian Express, I think what are the articles in today's Indian Express? There okay, I'm unable to recollect right now, but if there is anything, I will share it in the same PDF format, right? I think this format is easy for you to remember things. For discussion sake and for revision sake also. Oops. Yeah. Okay. Okay then.
Please share in Telegram. Sir.
Yeah, I will share it with you. I hope most of you are in the same group, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay then. See you all tomorrow.
Okay, sir.